imperative that a call for military action is necessary. We've heard an outpouring of support from citizens, professionals, pundits, and political figures alike. We have heard your cry and intend to act in any way we can. We also want you to understand what is required to take military action on domestic soil. To understand what has prompted this need for action, it is in direct response to the pandemic we currently face, known as PACE. This illness has been sweeping and disruptive. It turns its victims into mindless feeding machines, crazed on devouring anyone they come in contact with. In turn, anyone they come in contact with also becomes infected, guaranteeing the same fate befall them as well. This is where we've heard the most losses to our police, fire, and rescue units. It's becoming a serious health risk in every community. Not since the Black Death have we heard calls from medical professionals to burn the bodies of the dead. We believe we've lost far too many of our brave first responders to not take additional action to ensure their safety in any way we can. Even with the extreme nature of the illness, we believe with further effort that we can overcome the illness and restore order to our communities, even though we may have to face a new normal living in a post-PACE world. Before I discuss further, I also want you to understand that we are currently assisting in vaccine and curative efforts with CDC as well as pharmaceuticals in hopes to treat this illness in the future. You will hear more about that during the address. At this time, General Valentine Robertson will be briefing the President on the use of military forces on domestic soil. This is not just a report on action plans, but assisting in understanding and overcoming the objections we'll need to address. It's why Congress is here, because your actions will be definitive in our moving forward. Although the Department of Defense is in full support of this initiative, we do have a great deal of legal issues to overcome. Many believe it is as simple as commanding the armed forces to act at the behest of the President. That is a mistake. There have been a few that have said they could also act in a supporting role. Although the latter is more accurate, as we have supplied reconnaissance and military intelligence support, both are more to be put to fantasy movies and books. We constantly hear books and associated movies. They get this information wholly incorrect. Simply moving in tanks to the streets may never be an option for obvious reasons, most notably the perception that a tank rolling through a street would make, and then are they needed or even legally usable? They would do damage to public property. The biggest hurdle we have is the Posse Comitatus Act, which was passed into law June 18th, 1978. It is the first law that would need to be addressed. I know many of you have heard of a posse. A sheriff or other duly designated officer deputizes civilians to overcome an outlaw or other insurrection. This law was made to directly dissuade the formation of a posse or deputization through the use of military forces. It prevents military personnel from affecting policy on domestic soil. In short, it prevents military action, or as some of you have stated, your distaste for the wording of martial law, which we share your feelings on that subject. At no time can we simply hand over control of state-run agencies to military generals. Many of you would consider such a move catastrophic. I must also make clear that National Guard, having been in control and the command of state-run initiatives, would not be included in this action. National Guard can freely act within domestic soil in their specific states and under their current command. That has not changed. Are there exceptions or effective deviations to the rule? Of course, but they've been clearly defined, and it's where PACE has been most effective at deterring further assistance. The most definitive exception would be an attack from a foreign entity that would fall solely and appropriately to the duty of the armed forces to repel such a threat. PACE is clearly not considered a foreign threat. We are not being invaded by a foreign army, but citizens infected by the illness itself. Were we to stay in the confines of this system, the best the armed forces could do is to provide aid or supporting infrastructure to the states. We can provide that in the use of radar, intelligence, scientific and medical assistance, which we have been doing to the best of our ability and will continue to do so within the confines of the law. That does not include armaments, personnel for policing, or other actionable activities. These rules are clear. The first thing our team did was to study when has military acted on domestic soil. The exception was clearly the Insurrection Act of 1807. This command clearly directs the President to command federalized National Guard troops as well as military assets to deter civil disorder, insurrections, and rebellions. The last time this was imposed was in the 1992 riots associated with Rodney King, with a purpose to suppress the riots. Armed with this information, our first belief was that civil disorder would allow us to take the appropriate action. Unfortunately, the wording was clearly associated with civil unrest or a concerted effort such as riots, and this unrest is not a concerted effort as how we're dealing with it now, so much as it is a symptom of the activity itself, or the illness, if you will. The President did not feel that this would be enough to properly address the use of the Insurrection Act. It also required a proclamation that the act would be performed and legally the infected are not considered reasonably capable of understanding such a proclamation. Even if we could provide a legal path to the letter of the law, we can never truly overcome the spirit of the law. The secondary is that the reports that have been made regarding the illness still maintain that it is a controllable infection and that local police and National Guard forces are unable or able to contain control of the illness within their areas, which has deterred the President from taking any action whatsoever, especially within the confines of this law. So what is the answer? In 2007, the Defense Authorization Bill authorized U.S. Armed Forces to restore public order and enforce laws in the aftermath of a natural disaster, terrorist attack, or other incidents. It specifically addressed in its wording pandemics or epidemics, which would apply here, to such an extent that authorities of the state were incapable of maintaining public order, which would be the case with the PACE infection. This wording was very specific in its use. It did not authorize the execution of any laws, and in 2008, this law was repealed in its entirety. We are asking Congress to support us in reenacting this said legislation in part, restoring the presidential power to act in the case of an epidemic. We understand the extreme nature of the bill we are presenting, But we must be honest with ourselves. We are living in extremely unnatural times. We cannot wait for this bill to sit in a committee. We cannot wait for arguments or even debate. We need to be unified in this, the 11th hour, to take action, not in part, but as a whole, to quickly and aggressively pass this legislation and empower the President to activate U.S. military agents to support by means of the use of force to regain order. We are requesting the President's support to fast-track this legislation through the legislative and executive branches to act in accordance. We must do this if we are to save America and our way of life. I thank you for your attention to this matter, and I leave the decision in your capable hands. Honorable gentlemen and ladies, good night.
We'll now vote for the Homeland Preparedness Bill. I'm sorry, this section is classified. This funding shall commence in conjunction with large-scale outbreak of classified. Civilian and military units shall be trained in containment and combat of classified. Flesh eating, that's classified, far surpassing our darkest nightmares.